Still in our overall plan scheme of redemption here. Last week, we were starting in on Micah. We finished up Isaiah. We were starting in on Micah. And I don't remember, did I pull this up last week? The stuff from Micah? I may have just been excited. And okay, I didn't show it. I was excited to get in it and I just completely forgot about it. I've got these little charts here. If you can see it, they kind of help me. But we're in Micah and we're making connections to the New Testament from Micah. We already talked about this last week, but go to Micah chapter 5, please. Micah chapter 5. And we noticed there are some things that we don't have to guess about at all because it's revealed to us in the New Testament exactly what these things were foretelling about. And those are my favorite ones because we don't have to guess at all. And in Micah chapter 5, we looked at verse 2 specifically, where it says, "But as for you, Bethlehem Ephrathah, too little to be among the clans of Judah, from you one will go forth for me to be ruler in Israel. His goings forth are from long ago, from the days of eternity." And we talked about how that's quoted at least 3 times in the Gospels later, talking about Jesus. That's where the Messiah was to be born. But something I want to bring out from this section is verse 5. The first line of verse 5, still in this section that we know is talking about Jesus. We don't have to guess. But verse 5, where it says, "This one will be our peace." We noticed this before, but talking about Jesus, he said, "This one will be our peace." So hold that in your brain, lock it in, because that's going to be really important when we get to chapter 7, which is where we're going next, chapter 7. So look over at chapter 7, please. Chapter 7. And again, we're not looking at everything. We're not looking at every spot that connects to the New Testament, because all of it does, really. But Micah chapter 7, we're going to start at verse 14. Start at verse 14. We talked about how Micah was overall, he was a prophet in Judah, and he was prophesying about the judgment on Israel and Judah. And there would be a literal return back to Judah and Jerusalem. They would rebuild. There would be spiritual reformation, all that stuff. But then we talked about how things connect even further, just like Micah chapter 5. We don't have to guess. So if you're in Micah 7, look at verse 14 with me, and let's read down to the end of the book there. Verse 14, please. "Shepherd your people with your scepter." Ooh, hey, maybe your brains are already tingling a little bit with some Jesus shadows on that one. "Shepherd your people with your scepter, the flock of your possession, which dwells by itself in the woodland, in the midst of a fruitful field. Let them feed in Bashan and Gilead, as in the days of old. As in the days when you came out from the land of Egypt, I will show you miracles. Nations will see and be ashamed of all their might. They will put their hand on their mouth. Their ears will be deaf. They will lick the dust like a serpent, like reptiles of the earth. They will come trembling out of their fortresses. To the Lord our God, they will come in dread. They will be afraid before you." Look at verse 18. "Who is a God like you, who pardons iniquity and passes over the rebellious act of the remnant of his possession? He does not retain his anger forever, because he delights in unchanging love. He will again have compassion on us. He will tread our iniquities underfoot. Yes, you will cast all their sins into the depths of the sea. You will give truth to Jacob and unchanging love to Abraham, which you swore to our forefathers from the days of old." Now, in this wonderful section that we could spend a lot of time on, I just want to point out a couple of things here. Notice how many times it says, "as in the days of old," or "from days of old." I see at least 3 times where he says that, "as in the days of old." Do things like you did in the days of old. That's what he is sort of calling God to do and knows that God will do. Talk about in verse 14 that he wants God to be their shepherd. He wants him to rule over them with his scepter. There's a flock that's his possession. We've already made connections to that in the New Testament. In verse 18, pardons iniquity, passes over rebellious act of the remnant. He doesn't hold on to his anger forever. Verse 19, he will tread our iniquities underfoot. Remember all these things because we're going to look at somewhere else. And then verse 20, you will give truth to Jacob and unchanging love to Abraham, which you swore to our forefathers from the days of old. So all of these things, I hope, make you think about Jesus. There's a bunch of spots that we could go for this, but I really want to go to Luke chapter 1. Luke chapter 1, please. Because before Jesus is ever born, John the Baptizer's father has this whole, I don't even know what to call it, diatribe. He has this whole thing that he says. And it's just full of what we just read, full of the things that we just read about. And in Luke chapter 1, Zacharias, who's John the Baptizer's father, couldn't speak until John was born, and he said his name will be John, and then his mouth is open. He starts praising God. You remember that, Zacharias? Well, in Luke chapter 1, and if you look at verse 68, I want you to notice how many of there are phrases like "from the days of old" that we just noticed from Micah chapter 7, things about treading iniquities or redemption or salvation. is here. And so look at this and who he's talking about. Verse 68. Blessed be the Lord God of Israel, for he has visited us and accomplished redemption for his people. He's raised up a horn of salvation for us in the house of David his servant, as he spoke by the mouth of his holy prophets from of old. Salvation from our enemies and from the hand of all who hate us, to show mercy toward our fathers, to remember his holy covenant, the oath which he swore to Abraham our father. Remember, we saw that just in Micah chapter 7. To grant us that we, being rescued from the hand of our enemies, might serve him without fear, in holiness and righteousness before him all our days. And you, child, will be called the prophet of the Most High, for you will go on before the Lord to prepare his ways. Talking about John and his roles here. Look at verse 77. To give to his people the knowledge of salvation by the forgiveness of sins, because of the tender mercy of our God. Remember the unchanging love and compassion that was in Micah chapter 7? With which the sunrise from on high will visit us, to shine upon those who sit in darkness and shadows of death, to guide our feet. Look at this. This is just too good. For Micah chapter 5 said, this one will be our peace, talking about Jesus. Look at this. To guide our feet into the way of peace. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how awesome the scriptures are about Jesus. That is just so cool to me. This one will be our peace, and he will guide our feet into the way of peace. So cool. Okay, any thoughts on these connections from Micah 7 to Jesus? Okay. All right, well then let's move on from Micah. There's many more things, unless anybody has any comments or anything from Micah. All right, well let's move on. So the next one we're going to go to is going to be Zephaniah here, Zephaniah. And now we're starting to get to, now we're going to prophets that are prophesying after Israel's captivity, after Israel has been taken captive by the Assyrians. And I think that's significant. There's sort of a shift that happens with some of these prophets, and then especially when we get to, like Jeremiah, where it's about to come. It's right at the door for Babylon to come. But let's go to Zephaniah, please. Zephaniah. Again, it's kind of hard for me to find some of these minor prophets while I'm talking at the same time. If you blink, you'll miss some of them. Zephaniah. All right. So Zephaniah, he is a prophet in the years before the first Babylonian attack on Judah and Jerusalem. And this, if you look at Zephaniah 1, and let's read verse 1 here. The word of the Lord which came to Zephaniah, son of Cushai, son of Gedaliah, son of Amariah, son of Hezekiah, in the days of Josiah, son of Ammon, king of Judah. Now, I know it's been several weeks since we talked about the kings and if they were good or bad, but Josiah, thumbs up or thumbs down on Josiah? Yeah, thumbs up. Appreciate that. Big thumbs up for Josiah. We love Josiah. But one of the things that's fascinating about Zephaniah is this is very not complimentary. I know it's probably not the best way to say that, but if you think about a prophet prophesying in the days of Josiah, don't you think it would be full of compliments? And, you're doing all kinds of great things. You found the book of the law. You're making all these sweeping reforms, but that's not what happens. And so some people suggest that because there's a sincere lack of pats on the back or anything for Josiah, who was a wonderful king, a lot of people will say that maybe Zephaniah's prophecy was before they found the book of the law. And this was sort of you got to change your ways. Judgment's coming before they found the book of the law. And that's absolutely possible. They're doing evil. They thought God wouldn't do anything about it. Look at chapter 1, verse 12. Chapter 1, verse 12. People in Judah and Jerusalem are doing evil, and they kind of think, well, God won't do anything about it. Look at verse 12. It will come about at that time that I will search Jerusalem with lamps. I will punish the men who are stagnant in spirit, who say in their hearts, the Lord will not do good or evil. It's like, the world is just going on exactly as it has been going on. The Lord's not going to do anything to us. Of course, that is just straight terrible to say about God, but that's sort of what they were saying. And so we see at least their attitudes there. Notice with me verses 14 through 18. Verses 14 through 18. Verses 14 through 18 of chapter 1. Near is the great day of the Lord, near and coming very quickly. Listen, the day of the Lord. In it, the warrior cries out bitterly. A day of wrath is that day, a day of trouble and distress, a day of destruction and desolation, a day of darkness and gloom, a day of clouds and thick darkness, a day of trumpet and battle cry against the fortified cities and the high corner towers. I will bring distress on men so that they will walk like the blind, because they have sinned against the Lord and their blood will be poured out like dust, and their flesh like dung. Neither their silver nor their gold will be able to deliver them on the day of the Lord's wrath, and all the earth will be devoured in the fire of his jealousy. He will make a complete end, indeed a terrifying one, of all the inhabitants of the earth. Now, this is a judgment that's being talked about against Judah and Jerusalem, that Babylon is going to come, and that's who this is talking about. But this sounds like the end of the world, doesn't it? That's the language that's being used. We've noticed this several times, that this language is used about judgment. It would be the end of their world. Look at chapter 2, verses 1 through 3, right after this section that we just read. Chapter 2, verses 1 through 3. In response to all this judgment, the end that's coming upon them, this is what God tells them to do. Gather yourselves together. Yes, gather, O nation without shame, before the decree takes effect. The day passes like the chaff, before the burning anger of the Lord comes upon you, before the day of the Lord's anger comes upon you. Seek the Lord, all you humble of the earth, who have carried out his ordinances. Seek righteousness, seek humility. Perhaps you will be hidden in the day of the Lord's anger. Perhaps you will be hidden in the day of the Lord's anger. So they're told to repent. They're told to change their ways, and maybe God would spare them from all this destruction. Oh, I'm getting excited and moving on again. Let's see. There we go. There's that chart I was talking about earlier again. Anyway, let's see. We just stopped at verse 3. Look at verse 4. So it's not just going to be Judah. It's not just going to be Jerusalem. Look at verse 4 through, we'll read through to verse 15. Verse 4, for Gaza will be abandoned, and Ashkelon a desolation. Ashdod will be driven out at noon, and Ekron will be uprooted. Woe to the inhabitants of the seacoast, to the nation of the Cherethites. The word of the Lord is against you, O Canaan, land of the Philistines. I will destroy you so that there will be no inhabitant. So the seacoast will be pastures, with caves for shepherds and fold for flocks. And the coast will be for the remnant of the house of Judah. They will pasture on it. In the houses of Ashkelon they will lie down at evening. For the Lord their God will care for them and restore their fortunes. I have heard the taunting of Moab and the revilings of the sons of Ammon, with which they have taunted my people and become arrogant against their territory. Therefore, as I live, declares the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, surely Moab will be like Sodom, and the sons of Ammon like Gomorrah, a place possessed by nettles and salt pits and a perpetual desolation. The remnant of my people will plunder them, and the remainder of my nation will inherit them. This they will have in return for their pride, because they have taunted and become arrogant against the people of the Lord of hosts. The Lord will be terrifying to them, for he will starve all the gods of the earth, and all the coastlands of the nations will bow down to him, everyone from his own place. You also, O Ethiopians, will be slain by my sword. He will stretch out his hand against the earth and destroy Assyria. He will make Nineveh a desolation, parched like the wilderness. Flocks will lie down in her midst. All beasts which range in herds, both the pelican and the hedgehog, will lodge in the top of her pillars. Birds will sing in the window. Desolation will be on the threshold, for he has laid bare the cedar work. I mean, this is an intense judgment that's being pictured here. And actually, let's read verse 15 too. This is the exultant city which dwells securely, who says in her heart, I am, and there's no one besides me. How she has become a desolation, a resting place for beasts. Everyone who passes by her will hiss and wave his hand in contempt. So this is serious desolation. This is serious judgment language, so much so that the animals are going to take the place of where these people are living. The animals are still going to live there, although everything will be destroyed here. Any thoughts or anything on these verses that we're looking at so far? Because we're going to look at some more here. Okay. Okay, well, let's take a look at chapter 3 then, chapter 3. And let's look at the first 8 verses here. First 8 verses. Woe to her who is rebellious and defiled, the tyrannical city. She heeded no voice. She accepted no instruction. She did not trust in the Lord. She did not draw near to her God. Her princes within her are roaring lions. Her judges are wolves at evening. They leave nothing for the morning. Her prophets are reckless, treacherous men. Her priests have profaned the sanctuary. They have done violence to the law. The Lord is righteous within her. He will do no injustice. Every morning he brings his justice to light. He does not fail. But the unjust knows no shame. I have cut off nations. Their corner towers are in ruins. I have made their streets desolate with no one passing by. Their cities are laid waste without a man, without an inhabitant. I said, surely you will revere me. Accept instruction. So her dwelling will not be cut off, according to all that I have appointed concerning her. But they were eager to corrupt all their deeds. Therefore, wait for me, declares the Lord, for the day when I rise up as a witness. Indeed, my decision is to gather nations, to assemble kingdoms, to pour out on them my indignation, all my burning anger, for all the earth will be devoured by the fire of my zeal. Wow. I mean, God is going to be judging these nations around them. But verses 1 through 8, what city is being talked about here? Yeah, Jerusalem. And God says he's going to bring the nations to destroy them because of the evil that they've done. And he called out to them over and over and over again. Surely, he says, I've destroyed all these nations here. And surely in verse 7, he's like, surely they're going to revere me now. Surely they're going to accept this instruction now. But they don't. They didn't want any part of that. So God is going to bring this judgment upon them. But that's not the end. That's not the entire end. So let's read verses 9 through 20. 9 through 20, please. For then I will give to the peoples purified lips, that all of them may call on the name of the Lord to serve him shoulder to shoulder. And look where these people are coming from. Verse 10, from beyond the rivers of Ethiopia, my worshipers, my dispersed ones will bring my offerings. In that day you will feel no shame because of all your deeds by which you have rebelled against me. For then I will remove them from your midst, your proud exulting ones, and you will never again be haughty on my holy mountain. Now think about that from Isaiah. We've seen my holy mountain before. But I will leave among you a humble and lowly people, and they will take refuge in the name of the Lord. The remnant of Israel will do no wrong and tell no lies, nor will a deceitful tongue be found in their mouths. For they will feed and lie down with no one to make them tremble. Shout for joy, O daughter of Zion. Shout in triumph, O Israel. Rejoice and exult with all your heart, O daughter of Jerusalem. The Lord has taken away his judgments against you. He has cleared away your enemies. Look at this, the middle of verse 15. The King of Israel, the Lord, Yahweh, is in your midst. You will fear disaster no more. In that day, it will be said to Jerusalem, do not be afraid, O Zion. Do not let your hands fall limp. The Lord your God is in your midst, a victorious warrior. He will exult over you with joy. He will be quiet in his love. He will rejoice over you with shouts of joy. I will gather those who grieve about the appointed feasts. They came from you, O Zion. The reproach of exile is a burden on them. Behold, I am going to deal at that time with all your oppressors. I will save the lame and gather the outcast. I will turn their shame into praise and renown in all the earth. At that time I will bring you in, even at that time when I gather you together. Indeed, I will gather you renown and praise among all the peoples of the earth, when I restore your fortunes before your eyes, says the Lord. This is a wonderful, wonderful section. So remember, there is this literal judgment that's coming upon them. I don't have the timeline, but Babylon is coming. There's this literal judgment that's coming upon them because, as we just read in chapter 2 and chapter 3, where they had sinned, God had cried out to them over and over and over again, but they would have none of it. This literal judgment on them, but they would return. This remnant would return. But then verses 9 through 20 are really they really stand out. Because if you think about the language that's used in verses 9 through 20, did that remnant that returned in, Ezra, Nehemiah, those days, Haggai, Zechariah, even to Malachi, did that remnant ever really fulfill everything that's here? Well, not really. There was certainly a reform that was made when they came back, but then pretty quickly, humans did human things and started messing stuff up. But this people that he's talking about has a whole lot of parallels to some New Testament stuff in the reign of the Messiah. And so I just want to look at a couple of these. Well, before we do that, any thoughts or anything on this section before we start diving into some more? Okay. I really like Zephaniah, by the way. There's a lot more we could talk about. We just looked at verses 9 through 20, specifically where it said, my holy mountain. We saw that in Isaiah 2, Isaiah 11, Isaiah 65, and verse 60 and chapter 66. What was my holy mountain referring to there? Zion, absolutely. And so what is Zion in the New Testament? Do what? Yes, it is Jerusalem. I would say it's the heavenly Jerusalem. Because if we went to Hebrews chapter 12, talking to Christians in Hebrews chapter 12, he told those Christians in the first century, you've already come to Mount Zion, the city of the living God, the heavenly Jerusalem, myriads of angels, church of the firstborn, all those things that are listed there. It's Christians. It's God's people. It's God's people under the reign of the Messiah. And I think we see that in a couple of these. Look at chapter 3, verse 13, please. Chapter 3, verse 13. Talking about the remnant of Israel will do no wrong, tell no lies, nor will a deceitful tongue be found in their mouths. They will feed and lie down with no one to make them tremble. Again, there was a physical remnant that came back and rebuilt Jerusalem and lived there. But I don't know if we would describe them as telling no lies, no deceitful tongue, or feeding and lying down with no one to make them tremble. I mean, if you think about the physical return, think about Nehemiah when they're rebuilding the wall. What did they have in one hand and what did they have in the other hand while they're rebuilding this wall? Sword in one and their hammers or whatever tools they had. I mean, it sounds like they had some people persecuting them. There was some stuff going on. So maybe it's not quite a physical thing that we're talking about here, but look over in Revelation with me, please. And look over at Revelation 14. And Revelation 14. Let's look down at, we're going to look at verses 4 and 5. Revelation 14, 4 and 5. And we could do a lot more in this than what we're probably going to do this morning, but let's start in verse 1, chapter 14, verse 1. Then I looked, and behold, the Lamb was standing on Mount Zion. Oh, wow. Let's talk about some New Testament imagery here. Who's the Lamb? That's Jesus, undoubtedly. Mount Zion is fascinating to me. Mount Zion, Hebrews chapter 12. You have already come to Mount Zion. I think it's so important for us. And with him, 144,000 having his name and the name of his Father written on their foreheads. And I heard a voice from heaven like the sound of many waters, the sound of loud thunder. And the voice which I heard was like the sound of the harpists playing on their harps. And they sang a new song before the throne and before the four living creatures and the elders. And no one could learn the song except the 144,000 who had been purchased from the earth. Verse 4, these are the ones who have not been defiled with women, for they have kept themselves chaste. These are the ones who follow the Lamb wherever he goes. These have been purchased from among men as firstfruits to God and to the Lamb. And no lie was found in their mouth. They are blameless. That is fascinating stuff to me, right? Isn't that exactly what we just saw in Zephaniah 3, verse 13, about this remnant of Israel that was being talked about there? So it really seems like we saw my holy mountain in chapter 3, verse 11. That goes back to Isaiah, where we've seen my holy mountain and the reign of Jesus and Jesus's people. Sounds like this is Jesus's people under the new covenant, right? They have no lie in their mouths, all that stuff. That's not to say that we don't lie or that people don't lie, but the people who have been purchased by Jesus, who follow the Lamb wherever he goes, those are his people. Any thoughts on that? Anything? Okay, let's look at another one in Zephaniah, please, in chapter 3. Oh man, there's so many we could do on this. Let's look at verses 15 and 16. I tried to point these out, emphasize them a little bit as we were just reading through it. But in verses 15 and 16, the Lord has taken away his judgments against you. He's cleared away your enemies. The King of Israel, Yahweh, is in your midst. You will fear disaster no more. In that day it will be said in Jerusalem, don't be afraid, O Zion. Do not let your hands fall limp. And here, the King, who's Yahweh, who's in their midst. I mean, who is that got to be talking about? King Yahweh, who's in their midst. Yes, in the Old Testament, the Lord was in their midst, but also in the return, the physical return back to Judah and Jerusalem. When they rebuilt the temple, what was a really important and impactful event that didn't happen? That might be a terrible way to ask this question. When we rebuilt the temple, yes, ma'am. The glory of the Lord didn't go back. Isn't that huge? I mean, you think about when the tabernacle was built and the cloud filled it so that the priests, they couldn't do their normal functions. Even Moses couldn't go in there. That was a huge event. When the temple was built, Solomon does this amazing dedicatory prayer and everything in 1 Kings 8, I think it is. And then again, actually before he even says that prayer, the cloud came down, the glory of the Lord, people couldn't do what they needed to do. And then we're going to get to Ezekiel later, but there's this picture of the glory of the Lord leaving the temple. And then here, well, not really here, but when they return, they rebuild the temple and the glory of the Lord doesn't fill it. That's huge. That's absolutely huge. But the King of Israel, the Lord, is in your midst. You will fear no more. And in that day, it will be said to Jerusalem, we've got my holy mountain, which we know from Isaiah, talks about God's people under the rule of Jesus. We've seen that. The remnant of Israel. And now we have the King of Israel, Yahweh, being in their midst. Jesus is king. I don't even know if we want to go to some passages about that. I think we probably all agree with that. Jesus is king. Absolutely. And God is in their midst, and God would dwell with man. This is the part that's so fascinating to me. Notice in verse 15, the King of Israel, Yahweh, is in your midst. Not that you will be in his midst, but he is in your midst. And I think that is an amazing thing. Let's look at a couple passages on that. Look at John chapter 1, please. John chapter 1. When we're talking about Yahweh being in our midst, you know you got to go to John 1, right? Well, in John chapter 1, probably many of us here remember the first couple of verses. In the beginning was the Word was with God, the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God, all of that stuff. And then we usually jump down to verse 14. That's where I want to go, is verse 14. The Word became flesh and dwelt among us, and we saw his glory, glory as of the only unique one from the Father, full of grace and truth. We saw his glory. So you have God, the King of Israel, Jesus, Yahweh, dwelling with man, being with man. It's just so amazing and fascinating. Look at John 14, please. John 14. We'll look down at verse 7. John 14, and we'll go down to verse 7. This is where Jesus says, if you had known me, you would have known my Father also. And from now on, you know him and have seen him. And then Philip in verse 8 says, Lord, show us the Father, and it's enough for us. Jesus said to him, have I been so long with you, and yet you have not come to know me, Philip? He who has seen me has seen the Father. How can you say, show us the Father? Do you not believe that I am in the Father and the Father is in me? The words that I say to you, I do not speak on my own initiative, but the Father abiding in me does his works. Believe me that I am in the Father is in me. Otherwise, believe because of the works themselves. Truly, truly, I say to you, he who believes in me, the works that I do, he will do also. And greater works than these he will do, because I go to the Father. Look at verse 13. Whatever you ask in my name, that will I do, so that the Father may be glorified in the Son. If you ask me anything in my name, I will do it. I actually read a lot further than I wanted to. It's just too good. There's just so much good stuff there. But Philip saying, Lord, show us the Father, and it's enough for us. Jesus is like, if you had seen me, you've seen the Father. The glory of God, Yahweh, in their midst. Jesus was that, and he still is that. Wonderful stuff. Let's look at just a couple more here. Look down at verse 23. Verse 23, John 14, 23. So in the same text here, it's just so good. Look at verse 22, actually. Judas, not Iscariot, said to him, Lord, what then has happened that you are going to disclose yourself to us and not to the world? Jesus answered and said to him, if anyone loves me, he will keep my word, and my Father will love him, and we will come to him and tabernacle with him. We will make our abode with him. Yes, sir.
In its verb form means to dwell among.
Mm-hmm.
And people generally think what means it means. No, it means a place where someone is dwelling with someone else. And so when you look through the Bible, as we've been kind of doing the scheme of redemption, it's always connected in some way to the tabernacle.
Mm.
From the Garden of Eden, through the tabernacle in the wilderness, through the temple, through Jesus, through the church. It all is this idea of God dwelling with his people.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Amen. And if you've been in our Wednesday night classes on Acts, I think Dan's done a wonderful job of showing the temple conflicts. You know, that it's not about that physical temple anymore. It's about the people who are the temple, that God dwells in them. And that's so huge. And that's exactly what we saw all the way back in Zephaniah 3, that the King of Israel, Yahweh, would be in their midst. And so these people are not yet fully purchased and they're in heaven. These are people who are still on earth, and yet God dwells with them. Fascinating, wonderful stuff. And if this doesn't fill you up with joy and hope, I don't know what will. Okay, any thoughts on any more of this? Okay, let's look at just a couple more passages on this just to make the same point. We already have made this point, but let's look at Revelation 21 really quickly. Revelation 21, and look down at verse 3. Revelation 21, verse 3. And this is just so amazing, right? I mean, when we read this, just so amazing. Revelation 21, verse 3. And I'm so glad I didn't intend for this to happen. I had other passages written here that we were going to go to that I'm skipping over, but I think this one connected to the one that Jesus just said is so wonderful. Revelation 21, verse 3. I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, behold, the tabernacle of God is among men, and he will dwell among them, and they shall be his people, and God himself will be among them. I mean, wow, that's incredible, is it not? It's the same thing that we've just been talking about. The tabernacle of God, the dwelling place of God, is among men. He will dwell among them. They shall be his people. God himself will be among them. That goes back to just what we've been reading in Zephaniah 3. The remnant of Israel will be his people on his holy mountain, and the Lord will be in their midst. Okay. Any thoughts or anything on that one? That's just good stuff. Okay. Let's look at Zephaniah 3, verse 17. Zephaniah 3, verse 17. And I should have just told you to hold your hand in Revelation because we're going back there just a second. But in Revelation 3 and verse 17, it's repeated again. Yahweh, your God, is in your midst. And notice what the description is after Yahweh, your God, is in your midst. A victorious warrior, or your version might even say a warrior who saves, or a triumphant warrior, or I can't remember the last one. Anybody have something else there that I didn't just say? There's one more, and I can't remember what it was. Mighty? A mighty warrior? Is that what it says? Okay, yeah. A mighty warrior. He will exult over you with joy. He will be quiet in his love. He will rejoice over you with shouts of joy. And I will gather all those who grieve about the appointed feast. They came from you, O Zion. Their reproach of exile is a burden on them. So where I think what we've been talking about, verses 15 and 16, we have to see Jesus as being part of this, if not all of the fulfillment of all of this. In verse 17, where Yahweh your God is in your midst, he's a victorious warrior. We got to look at Revelation 19 here. Look at Revelation 19, please. And we see Jesus being described as a victorious warrior, a mighty warrior, and a warrior that saves in Revelation 19. Revelation 19, please. And we'll go down to verse 11. Revelation 19 and go down to verse 11. And I saw heaven opened, and behold, a white horse, and he who sat on it is called Faithful and True. And in righteousness he judges and wages war. His eyes are a flame of fire, and on his head are many diadems. He has a name written on him which no one knows except himself. He is clothed with a robe dipped in blood. His name is called the Word of God. And the armies which are in heaven, clothed in fine linen, white and clean, were following him on white horses. From his mouth comes a sharp sword, so that with it he may strike down the nations. He will rule them with a rod of iron. He treads the winepress of his fierce wrath. Of the fierce wrath of God, the Almighty. And on his robe and on his thigh, he has a name written, King of Kings and Lord of Lords. Victorious, conquering warrior is Jesus. And that's so cool. I mean, it's just so cool. Any thoughts or comments on this one? Okay. Any thoughts or anything on Zephaniah as a whole? Anything that maybe we didn't talk about with Zephaniah? There's so much more. Yes, sir.
Sorry, I didn't have my thoughts together before. The beginning of Zephaniah is it's a great day of the Lord when armies of devastation are going to, basically be over everything. And then the end of Zephaniah is the Lord being the warrior who saves and gathers and scatters. And this image over and over again through the prophets about, yes, God scatters, but yes, God gathers. And so what is the purpose of doing that? And so we're kind of thinking about this in terms of the great plan or scheme of redemption. Can we see God doing that? And how does that take place? And so that's just kind of a thought, especially in these kind of shorter prophets that seem so dire in the beginning, but then you also have this gathering language. And so, when Jesus says, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father. If you know me, you know the Father. That's what Jesus is doing. Yes, he scatters because his word is hard for many to bear, but he also gathers. And so we can see God at work through Jesus. Maybe not in all these devastating ways necessarily, but we're seeing the character of God.
Yeah, absolutely. I really like the God who scatters is the same God who gathers. That'd be a great sermon title one day, maybe. Yeah, the God who scatters is also the God who gathers, and I love that. Yeah. Any other thoughts on Zephaniah as a whole, or? Okay. Well, let's move on then. Let's go to Nahum here. Nahum. Now, this is one of those prophets, or one of those things that really fascinates me. There are many of them that do, but like we talked about Jonah, how Jonah went to Nineveh, because Nahum is also addressing Nineveh in Nahum. It's just really fascinating to me that we'll talk about it more, but Nahum here, we're still in this sort of period where Israel has already been taken to exile, and they were taken away by Assyria, which Nineveh was the capital city of Assyria. And now we've got these prophets that are really to Judah, talking about all these things. So in Nahum, let me turn there too while I keep talking here. Nahum. And Nahum is another one of these really short minor prophets here. Nahum, look at chapter 1, verse 1, please. The oracle or burden of Nineveh, the book of the vision of Nahum the Elkoshite. So to Nineveh. So this would have maybe around 625 BC. So we're thinking about Jonah. Jonah was sent to Nineveh to tell them yet however many days and Nineveh will be destroyed. They repent and God spares them, right? And Jonah was really mad about that. He's like, oh, I just knew you were merciful, God, and you were going to spare them. He has a really hard time with that. But then this is maybe about 150 years after Jonah. And what we see here is that the people are once again wicked, and their end is going to be destruction. Look at Nahum 3, please. Nahum 3, and we'll look at verses 18 and 19. Nahum 3, verses 18 and 19. And there's many of these in these 3 short chapters here, but Nahum 3, look at 18 and 19, please. Your shepherds are sleeping, O king of Assyria. Your nobles are lying down. Your people are scattered on the mountains. There is no one to regather them. There is no relief for your breakdown. Your wound is incurable. All who hear about you will clap their hands over you. For on whom has not your evil passed continually? So the evil that, I don't know if I'm sure you all know more than I do about the horrors of Assyria. When they would take people captive, they would take these giant meat hooks and like put it in their clavicles and drag people along and all kinds of just brutal things that Assyria would do. And God is telling them all that evil that you've passed on all these other people, it's coming back to you. And God is judging them. God's judging them for all of their evil. And that would have been good news to Judah. So Israel had been taken captive by Assyria, brutal, terrible people who did this. And it would have been good news to Judah. So look at chapter 1, please. Chapter 1, this is what's so fascinating to me about Nahum. Is Nahum being delivered to Nineveh? Is it being delivered to Assyria? Or is this just talking about Nineveh and just talking about Assyria, but delivered to Judah to comfort Judah? And this is why I have these questions. Look at chapter 1, verse 4. Or 14, I said 4, didn't I? 14, I'm sorry. Chapter 1, verse 14. The Lord has issued a command concerning you. Your name will no longer be perpetuated. I will cut off idol and image from the house of your gods. I will prepare your grave, for you are contemptible. Behold, on the mountains, the feet of him who brings good news, who announces peace. We've seen that somewhere else. Celebrate your feasts, O Judah. Pay your vows, for never again will the wicked one pass through you. He is cut off completely. The one who scatters has come up against you. Man the fortress, watch the road, strengthen your back, summon all your strength. For the Lord will restore the splendor of Jacob like the splendor of Israel, even though devastators have devastated them and destroyed their vine branches. So this is where it's fascinating to me, because this part, at least this part, is very clearly to Judah, right? He's letting them know Nineveh has continued in their evil. They may have repented about 150 years ago, but they've continued in their evil, and I'm done with them. They took away my people Israel, and that was his ordained judgment on them. But he says, this is good news to you, Judah, right there in verse 15. This is good news to you. Go ahead and pay your vows, celebrate your feasts, because those people that so brutally really, killed and took captive your kinsmen, they're not going to bother you anymore. It's going to be somebody else later, but that's not really what Nahum is about. Those people aren't going to bother you, and that's sort of the good news of Nahum there in all of this destruction. That's the good news there. Any thoughts on Nahum as a whole or any of that stuff just brought out? Okay. So then the next question for me is, here's Nahum that is it sent to Nineveh or is it sent to Judah? It's good news to Judah, but it's really bad news for Nineveh and Assyria. How do we connect this to the New Testament? What is there for us from Nahum? This seems like, well, Assyria is going to get it. Judah, they're not going to come after you, so you're good. And maybe that's it. As far as direct quotes from Nahum, I am not aware of any direct quotes in the New Testament from Nahum. There's one that some people have suggested. Let's look at Romans 10:15. Romans 10:15. I'm going to go ahead and tell you this is not a direct quote from Nahum. But Romans 10, if you go down to verse 15 with me, please. This is also a passage that we just looked at recently because this is actually a quote from Isaiah. It's a quote from Isaiah in Romans chapter 10, and we'll look down at verse 15. And I think the reason why people make this connection will be readily apparent as we read it. Romans 10, and if you look down at verse 15 with me, please, where it says, how will they preach unless they are sent? Just as it is written, how beautiful are the feet of those who bring good news of good things. Now that is a quote from Isaiah 52, and I guess it's the same idea as Nahum chapter 1, verse 15 that we just read. Behold in the mountains the feet of him who brings good news, who announces peace. I guess it's the same idea, but it's not necessarily the same thing. The good news was that God's enemies were being judged and his people would be protected from them. God was protecting them by judging this other nation in Nahum, and especially pertaining to Nineveh, this capital city of Assyria. God was concerned with their behavior. In Romans chapter 10, just as a whole, it's talking about how Gentiles were grafted in and the Jews were, God wanted the Jewish people to come to him too. And so I think this connection that people make, at least with Nahum 1 verse 15, is that even back in the Old Testament where people will say, well, God only had dealings with Israel and only had dealings with these people that he chose for whatever reasons he did, Nahum and Jonah show us that God was concerned with Gentiles, right? God was still concerned with people who weren't the nation of Israel, and it shows God's nature. He wanted Nineveh to repent in Jonah. He relented of his judgment, but because they continued in their evil ways in a really short period of time, 150 years, God's punishment still came to them. Any thoughts or anything on that? Yes, sir.
Together this has application for first century Christians and Christians ever since that at any time where they're being persecuted by nations, governments, organized in some way, that God is going to judge those that are persecuting them. But in the meantime, what they need to do is what you read there from starting at verse 14 or verse 15 is make sure you are still serving God today despite those persecutions.
Mm-hmm.
That's the message that I take out.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. I appreciate that. Any other thoughts on Nahum or anything we just brought up? Okay, and we just Adam just mentioned the Lord who scatters is the same one who gathers. And so when we read chapter 2, verse 1, I couldn't help but notice where it says, the one who scatters has come up against you. I was like, oh, all right, there we go. There's my sermon right there. The one who scatters is the same one who gathers. Okay, any other thoughts on Nahum? Okay, see, we spent like 4 weeks on Isaiah, so we're getting some quick dopamine hits of these minor prophets. And how you doing? Keep it moving. All right, let's go on to the next. Oh, there it is. Nahum right there. I keep forgetting to click this thing. Somebody wave me down next time. Okay, so let's go to Habakkuk. Habakkuk, you can see we're still moving toward the attacks from Babylon on Jerusalem and Judah, and the exile is upcoming. And in Habakkuk, that's really what a lot of the message is. So go over to Habakkuk, please. By the way, when I was in Texas for 2 summers, I did some sermon or Bible class or something on Habakkuk. And I realized that everybody at that congregation in Lindale, they drop out the last K, and I don't know why. They say Habakkuk, and I'm like, there's another K there. It's Habakkuk. It's a random thing. No need to say that, but I just thought of it. So turn over to Habakkuk, please. Habakkuk. And Habakkuk is prophesying maybe around 609 to 607 to the southern kingdom of Judah. And this is a weird prophet too. In a lot of these prophets, it's God is talking to the prophet to go tell those people what's about to happen, or God talking to the prophet to tell the people this is what you need to do. But in Habakkuk, it's really different because Habakkuk sort of talks to God on behalf of the righteous people. It's kind of weird. And there's some stuff that, I don't know, maybe some of us might be uncomfortable with. Like if we were to pray some of the things that Habakkuk says, we might be uncomfortable with it. I think we can be because Habakkuk does it and God wants us to talk to him. But there's some things that he says that we might not be comfortable with saying. So for example, if you look at Habakkuk 1, and let's look at verses 1 and 2. The oracle or burden which Habakkuk the prophet saw. How long, O Lord, will I call for help and you will not hear? I mean, just right there. How many of us are going to pray that this afternoon? How long are you going to call out and you're not even hearing me? I don't know. Maybe we're uncomfortable with that, but also many of the Psalms say the same thing. I cry out to you, violence, yet you do not save. And so this is just a little bit different as far as prophets go. And there's this conversation that Habakkuk has with God and all these questions that he asked to him. Well, Habakkuk asks how long God will do nothing while evil is everywhere. And God says, look at verses 5 and 6. Verses 5 and 6. This is God speaking. He says, look among the nations, observe, be astonished, wonder, because I'm doing something in your days you would not believe if you were told. For behold, I am raising up the Chaldeans, we would call them Babylon, that fierce and impetuous people who march throughout the earth to seize dwelling places which are not theirs. And so Habakkuk is calling out, how long are you going to do nothing while all this evil is happening among your people? It's not just out there in the world, it's among your people. How long are you just going to do nothing? And God says, look, I'm doing something in your days that you won't even believe. I'm raising up Babylon. They're going to come in. They're going to wipe you out. They're going to take you captive. And so there's many things that we could talk about here. But God tells Habakkuk, look at chapter 2 and verses 2 and 3. Verses 2 and 3. God tells Habakkuk that this is certain, it's coming, and it's coming upon Jerusalem and Judah in his days. Look at verses 2 and 3. The Lord answered me and said, record the vision, inscribe it on tablets, that the one who reads it may run. For the vision is yet for the appointed time. It hastens toward the goal, and it will not fail. Though it tarries, wait for it, for it will certainly come. It will not delay. This judgment that's coming up against Jerusalem and Judah, God says, write it down on some tablets because it's happening. It's hastening toward the goal. Though it tarries, it's going to happen. It will certainly come. There's no doubt about it. God is bringing this judgment. Look at chapter 3, please. Chapter 3, verse 2, because Habakkuk is terrified about this. He's terrified of this judgment that's coming. Not yet. When we get, yes, I'm right there with you. Hold on to this for a second. Chapter 3, verse 2, please. Habakkuk is terrified of this judgment that's coming. Habakkuk 3, verse 2. Lord, I've heard the report about you, and he says, and I fear. Oh, Lord, revive your work in the midst of the years. In the midst of the years, make it known. In wrath, remember mercy. And then jump down to verse 16, please. Verse 16. I heard, and my inward parts trembled. At the sound, my lips quivered. Decay, your version might say rottenness, enters my bones. And in my place, I tremble, because I must wait quietly for the day of distress, for the people to arise who will invade us. So Habakkuk is terrified about this judgment that is certain, that is coming on them. And we're going to see a big demonstration of faith right after that verse that I just read. But he's human, and he's terrified of this judgment that is to come. And now let's read verses 17 through 19. No matter what comes, he's resolved to follow God. Look at verses 17 through 19, please. Though the fig tree should not blossom, and there be no fruit on the vines, though the yield of the olive should fail, and the fields produce no food, though the flock be cut off from the fold, and there be no cattle in the stalls, yet I will exult in the Lord. I will rejoice in the God of my salvation. The Lord God is my strength. He has made my feet like hinds' feet and makes me walk on my high places. So he's saying, no matter how scared I am, no matter how terrible this judgment's coming, I'm going to follow God. I'm going to exult in God. He's my strength. He's the one who takes care of me no matter what's going on earth. Okay. So now with the whole minute and a half that we have left, oh man. All right. So next week, Lord willing, we're going to talk about Eddie's verses that he brought up and a couple more that connect to the New Testament really explicitly. All right. So Habakkuk, if you want to look at Habakkuk, and then maybe we'll get started in Jeremiah. Thank you all very much.